So I've gotten a lot of comments on my Milky Way and night shots. I've gotten a lot of comments to go over the settings and how I capture them. So with Milky Way season right around the corner, I figured it would be a great time to do a video on that. What's going on, guys? So I've had a lot of interest in my night photography, so I just want to give you some guidelines and some things to go by as a beginner and if you're just starting out. But first, please leave a thumbs up on the video because it really helps out the channel. Alright, so for starters, the settings are going to vary depending on the scene, but what's the same for all the shots is I always shoot in fully manual mode, and you want to switch your file format so it's just RAW. That will allow you to have complete control over your camera, and then by shooting in just RAW file format, that will give you the most information to work with when you're doing your post-processing. For example, like recovering shadows in the foreground. So for the aperture, generally you're going to want to shoot this wide open. f2.8 is a good starting option. I would say you really want to have a lens that is at least f2.8, especially on like moonless nights when you're really trying to capture just the Milky Way and just stars. f2.8 is a really good aperture to have for that. If you have like an f1.8 or an f1.4, you can go down that open, but even at that, I would almost narrow it, to 2 or 2.5 just to sharpen up the whole image. And then with a newer camera that handles ISO really well, I've even shot it with a lens that only has f4, and I've gotten some good results from that. Shutter speed is another one that will significantly vary depending on the scene you're trying to capture. I'm not really a big fan of star trails, so I generally like to keep my night photography shots 20 seconds and under. That will keep star trailing to a minimum. But it is pretty fun to play around, put your camera in bulb mode and do a couple minute exposure, and then you can see the rotation of the stars. Sometimes I'll just mess around with that, but generally not a huge fan of star trails. ISO is probably something I change the most probably when I'm out shooting night photography. I've shot it anywhere from, your lowest setting, which is generally 100, all the way up to over 10,000. Your lower ISO, like 100, that's if you want star trails and all that. If the moon's out and there's some light pollution, I've gotten great shots at 1,000 ISO. And then like above 10,000 is if you're really limited on aperture. If you have a lens that only shoots at f4 like I used to, I've shot like over 12,000 ISO with that, and I've gotten it's not stellar results, but it allows you to shoot the Milky Way at f4. I generally don't recommend going that high because you're gonna get an image. If you're just sharing on Instagram or whatever, that's fine, but you're generally not going to get really a good printable image if the ISO is that high. Unless grain is something that you like in your images and that's something you go for, then roll with it. But a good starting point for ISO if you're going out just to shoot the Milky Way, I'd start with like ISO 3200. That's going to generally be enough to capture the Milky Way, and then you can play around with it from there. If you want to go a little brighter, push up to 4000, and it all depends on the camera and lens you got too. So start with 3200 and then just play around with it from there. As for focusing, 95% of the time I use manual focus. Generally it's too dark. If you try to autofocus, your camera can't see anything, so it's not going to autofocus on anything. So with focusing, I'd say definitely just stick to manual focus. Alright, so to wrap it up, let's just say it's a clear night out right now. You got your camera, you got your tripod, you're ready to go capture the Milky Way. There's no moon out, you just want to capture the stars. Start with your lens wide open. Hopefully you have at least f2.8. For shutter speed, I'd start with like 25 seconds. And then for your ISO, do ISO 3200. And then manually focus on a star, capture that, and see what you get. And just play with it from there. That's how you're going to learn. Just go out, experiment, and have fun with it. It doesn't have to be hard. Once you get the hang of it, night photography is actually really easy. Honestly, the biggest challenge is just getting out the door and getting to a place. Anyway, I hope this helped someone. Or inspired someone to get out there and try their hand at night photography. If it did, please hit that thumbs up button. And definitely don't hesitate to ask any questions down in the comments. Also follow me on Instagram at Brady Hummel if you like following along with my pictures. And with that said, I'll see you in the next video, guys.